Hello, welcome. Thank you, everybody who's able to join us in person, and thank you as well to those joining us online. My name is Jed Huntley. I work for the Indigenous Research and Engagement Platform of the Saskatchewan Centre for Patient-Oriented Research out of USask and Indigenous Peoples Health Research Centre, which is out of First Nations University. So today we are coming to you from the Good Medicine space, this space here, same as the last Core Alliance presentation, which is at the U of S in Saskatoon, Treaty 6 area, traditional territory of these Plains Cree, Anishinaabe peoples, Dakota, Nakota, and Métis peoples. And just putting it out there that we affirm our commitment to respectful relationships with one another and with this land. So just speaking of the land, I was at a ceremony there a little while ago, and they were just mentioning about the moon cycles and the moon phases, and we should be entering a new moon here for May. And each moon is kind of the name is nation specific, right? Some will call the one coming up as like the frost moon or the budding sap moon or the sucker moon, right? It's specific to the peoples of that area and then what they have going on in the natural environment. But they all correspond to the time of year. So this time of year, spring, regardless of the name of the moon, signifies a renewal, rebirth, an awakening, a cleansing, like a waking up and a letting go of winter. So I think winter forgot this year, this go around, that it's supposed to be kind of letting go. I think it's on snooze, so grateful for that. It's a beautiful day out there, but we might be back in winter here. This presentation, Allyship, beyond the title, what is allyship, who is an ally, and who is an ally, is part of SCPOR's POR Alliance. So the POR Alliance aims to bring together people and provide learning and collaborative opportunities for all members of patient-oriented research and those affiliated. So this includes researchers, patient partners, clinicians, decision makers, staff, elders, knowledge keepers, community members, and anybody else interested in patient-oriented research, right? So as an example, some of the things the POR Alliance does, not all, but some is presentations, discussions such as this, such as the CPR racism, such as this one here, and then see what we have upcoming. So these four extremely not only educated, but experienced, connected, and knowledgeable women we have with us today. Joining, we have Dr. Cassandra Opikokew Wajuntah, who is an associate professor in community health and epidemiology here at USask. Dr. Cari McIllduff, an assistant professor in community health epidemiology at USask. Dr. Holly McKenzie, assistant professor in School of Public Health here at USask. And Dr. Barb Fornssler, assistant professor of School and Public Health as well here at USask. So I'd also like to mention that these four women are all embedded in community in varying capacities a lot. So they are constantly on the go, extremely busy. So very much looking forward to what they have to say. And I think I'm going to leave it up to each of them to kind of share what else they would like to as part of the introduction. I'm going to pick on Cassandra, Dr. Opikokew Wajuntah. She can get us started off here with a brief intro of herself, and then we'll just go down the line if that's okay.
Sure. Super happy to be here today. Thanks to Jed and Skipper for the invite. I am a member of Canoe Lake Cree First Nation from Northwest Saskatchewan. I live in Fort Capella right now near Standing Buffalo, which is where my husband is from. I have 4 kids, ages 6 to 11. I have numerous dogs and cats, and I did have guinea pigs, but they passed away. They did. I didn't even tell you that. Yeah.
Thank you for not telling
Anyway,
so right now.
RIP to Duchess and Ladybug. But yes, and I'm here in community health and epidemiology, but I used to be at First Nations University of Canada and was director of the Indigenous Peoples Health Research Centre there. So I've only been at U of S for about 2 years.
Hi, I'm Cari. I'm really impressed that you got my last name right. Thanks, Jed. Look at you go. I am a mother figure to two younger cousins who are both First Nations to Canada, but I am a settler myself. And we have grown up together. So when we were 17, 7 and 1, our parents, our moms passed away. And so we kind of figured stuff out together very early. But that was the beginning of my journey to recognizing my power and privilege as a white woman, because they were mistreated right off the hop when we were putting the 7-year-old into grade 2. So very happy to be a mother figure to them and then a gaga to 4 little ones now. I'm too young to be that, but I love being young and being able to run around with them. And I am also in community health and epidemiology and feel less alone now that Cass is here with us. So thank you for coming and joining. I did my undergraduate in Edmonton, and then I did my graduate work at the University of Queensland in Australia. So I've had the opportunity. So I was born in Australia, but I've had the opportunity now in my older years, to learn from Indigenous folks both in Canada and Australia. And so I have a dual responsibility because my family are settlers in both spaces. And so there is a heavy responsibility that I carry there, and very grateful to those in those lands that have guided me and helped me to recognize that responsibility.
Awesome. I will also compliment getting my last name right. Many people are like Vernon and Osler. Anyway, so I tend to go by Barb. It's great to be here, and thank you so much for the opportunity to join this conversation. So yeah, I am a white settler living here. I grew up here actually in Saskatoon. It was sort of a full circle to come back to USask, where I did my undergraduate now many years ago. I started working in Indigenous focused health research in 2005 at the Indigenous Peoples Health Research Center under Dr. Carolyn Tate, and have continued that learning journey since. 5 generations of my family have been here in Saskatchewan, farming, building business, those things, and benefiting from the colonial systems that are the foundation of so much of the Canadian nation state now. So yeah, I think one of my first teachers was sort of like, "What's your role?" And I was like, "I think it's to talk to other white people." And and I've been trying to do that since. He very much agreed that was somewhere I could contribute to helping folks like me with my same lived experience of white privilege, understand their role in this conversation and the responsibility that needs to be taken, and the truth part of truth and reconciliation, and not sort of skipping over to what's easy, but to stand where it's uncomfortable, right? And to be uncomfortable and to learn to sit in that discomfort in a positive way. So I also, yes, work in the School of Public Health. My research program is community-based and tries to be action-oriented. I work in substance use-related research, particularly in harm reduction. And so we see disproportionate representation of folks who are marginalized in other ways, of course, in those circles. So that's where a lot of my work falls these days. It's been a challenging time here in Saskatoon, as I'm sure many people know, but we're going to keep fighting the good fight. And I'm really grateful to be here talking about one of those first things. What can allies do, and how can we do it in a positive way, in a generative way, without stepping on other people's knowledge. So that's important. I'll be quiet now. Hand it over. Oh, because you said uncomfortable. Oh, be uncomfortable.
It's like
right
this,
before
I
we-
am uncomfortable.
Yeah. I was like acknowledging you'd said that right before we started, so I'm quoting you.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry, I'm like, be uncomfortable, Cari. Sorry. Apologies.
Yeah. Apologies for what? So I'm Holly. I'm not going to compliment you on getting my husband, right? It is really quite easy. But do call me Holly. I don't think that these institutional kind of like standards and hierarchies really serve us in that way, in the way that I don't know when they were supposed to serve us or how, but I don't think they do. So I'm a white settler woman who's worked alongside First Nations and Métis people, specifically urban folks around, largely around reproductive justice and health. And this really comes from kind of 2 parts of my story. And Madeline Dion Stout, who I've been thinking about a lot because she passed in December. Always, she told me that we're all multi-storied, right? So we have many pathways and many stories. And two parts of my story is that I was always really uncomfortable with how people were judged for the reproductive decisions that they made. I grew up and went to Roman Catholic church. I grew up in an anti-choice family. And this was just always something that just like made me really angry. So I was always like yelling about how young women and girls were judged for their reproductive decisions, reading books and riding my horses growing up in Treaty 4 territory near on a farm. And I'm basically the same person now, except I have a horse dog that is a Great Dane instead of an actual horse because I live in Saskatoon. And I have more letters and credentials behind my name. And I have learned a lot, but a lot of what I've learned is actually from the people who have been really kind enough to work with me around advancing reproductive justice. And a lot of those relationships kind of come from early years when I was taking a lot of classes through First Nations University of Canada, and I started, I was involved in with the families of Sisters in Spirit and supporting their work, which is an organization of families who had lost Indigenous women and girls who disappeared or who had been murdered. And so organizing with them and learning from my friends that I was in classes with, I realized that the reproductive decisions that were affecting me were different than they were for my friends and colleagues, which led to kind of doing this work with First Nations and Métis people around what does reproductive freedom look like and reproductive integrity look like for First Nations and Métis women and Two-Spirit and trans and gender diverse people, which is some work we're doing, and also addressing some of the really big, egregious reproductive harms that come from the racist colonial system that people are accessing care through. So specifically, a lot of our work has focused around reproductive coercion. So that's like my research. And the thing that I am thinking about a lot today, kind of when I was coming to this, was how many mistakes I still make, how many times I'm still uncomfortable because I have some personality traits where I like to know things and I like to be right and I like to, help out. And so people will redirect me and told me I do it wrong. And I just go, okay, well, that's another learning to move on from. And it doesn't mean that you stop. And it doesn't mean that you can't continue. Like, obviously, don't work with people who don't want to work with you. Like, that's a different thing. Don't keep showing up on their doorstep. But when people are telling you, no, that doesn't work that way, or this won't work, or that was wrong, that's a gift. That's a teaching that you can carry forward in that. And yeah, and my dogs run my schedule. Very important to know about me. I have 2 big dogs now. We're thinking about a third, and they people will. There's a puppy. We're gonna probably drive out to Ontario for people. Everyone thinks it's a bad idea, but me. So a lot of times people will be like, can we meet this time? And I'll be like, no. And really it's because my dog has a very special appointment we need to take her to. Yeah. So that's important to know about me. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Oh.
All right. Thank you very much for the intro. I think to start. So I think this conversation is could go in many different directions. So just feel free. I kind of expect it to be quite organic and natural, but maybe just to get us started, if somebody just wanted to talk about, well, just the title of the president, what is an ally? What is allyship? And then we'll just see where we go from there if somebody wanted to, or your interpretation of, I guess you would say. So
Yeah. Who wants
to? Yeah, you would. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we should also
We can all talk
work
about
together. So when we are throwing jokes at each other and stuff, that's
that's what's going to be organic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not the first time we've met on this panel.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is good because I think relationships are foundational. Definitions of allyship. It's hard for me sometimes because I think a number of years ago working with some colleagues. So I'll just jump in and go.
You
first.
jump in. You've written about.
So yeah, and we were thinking about like a lot of people liked to use the term "I'm an ally," right? But that seemed very static and like sort of unmoving and not dynamic. And so we started using the term accomplice, which made some white settlers really uncomfortable. They're like, but accomplices are bad, and an accomplice is aiding and abetting in wrongdoing. Definition. And at the same time, we were like, well, yeah, but if you're aiding and abetting in wrongdoing against the colonial nation state, then maybe that's a good thing. And so I've been sort of saying, hey, I'm an accomplice, because an accomplice is doing something. They're not, hogging the whole limelight or anything, but they're active, they're mobilizing change, they're aiding and abetting in that wrongdoing against the colonial nation state and or other colonial entities and expressions. And so I've tended toward the term accomplice wherever I can, because that sort of made more sense to me. And I think everybody needs to think through their own politics around things, figure out where they draw their lines, how they understand themselves and their role. And I think that's really going back to sort of knowing one of the first things I think in calling myself an accomplice was sort of knowing who I was, where I came from, where my values were, so that I could introduce myself properly in community and talk from my heart and know who I am and where my values are and these kinds of things. It also allowed me to say like, yeah, okay, this is my line. When people cross that line, I'm going to push back. I can work in other ways. It just sort of helps once you know yourself and where you stand. I think it gives you a better indication of how you can support the work of others, how you can be an ally or an accomplice in a positive way that isn't about self-centering and is about using the skill set you have to help and support the good work of other people in the community. So I guess that's where I'd start with allyship, is turn it into an accomplice role. So
Right.
I'm like, I will just redefine the terms like a good academic.
Yeah, I've been thinking actually a lot about those terms, and then I actually usually depends on, because I embody different pieces of that continuum at different times. So I'm often an accomplice when I'm here at the university. I'm pushing the system, and I'm pushing the system to recognize the voices that aren't at the table, that are often not even invited to the table. But then I often go into co-resistorship or co-conspiratorship, where it's like, oh, well, these are things that we can do together, and I can be that support. I can find the funds. I can show up and do some organizing. I can do some of that. So I kind of find that, yes, I think for me, it's when I look at the continuum in my brain, it's like an ally. I can't call myself an ally. Those that do, I appreciate the recognition, but that's not something I can call myself. And then there's allyship, and then critical allyship, which is really pushing us more towards action, because allyship could be as little as, oh, I supported an Indigenous organization the other day. Well, okay, yes, that's good. And that's not bad. That's important. But if that's all you're doing, I think a huge part of that, and then it goes from, critical allyship, which is more action oriented, more of the teaching ourselves, not just teaching ourselves about history of people that are being oppressed continually, but also teaching ourselves about recognition of power and privilege in spaces that we sit in, recognition of where our voices need to be heard and our voices need to take a backseat. I don't know if anyone saw this, but at the point of Jed asking the question, I looked to Cass and said, do you want to go first? And we often have these conversations of your voice is important here, but also in allyship, maybe you feel less like it needs to be first. I don't know.
I'm just here to have fun.
I'm just here. Okay.
Fun today.
I'll stop asking. And then from on the continuum, then we move from critical allyship to accomplice, which I agree. Lots of people push back and be like, oh, but that's a bad thing. Yes. And if it's a bad thing, according to who? According to the settler state, right? Yeah, absolutely. And then co-resistor, which for me is my favorite, because I'm going to support that resistance against the colonial system. And then co-conspirator, I don't love as much, just because lots of times it'll be re-understood as oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, no, that's not actually it. And so, but I think underlying all of these pieces of the continuum is our own work. our own work to understand the realities, the lived and living realities of the humans that we're working with. And then also recognizing where it's our time to step forward and our time to step back and facilitate spaces in which those people can be put forward. So I love that you started with accomplice, because
I wrote down co-conspirator. I was like, good term.
yeah, I know, and I like her.
I'm like, I'm using that. Anyway.
It is a good term. No, yeah,
No, I was like, are you?
Yeah, I can talk. I think you both said so much. And I think the thread that I want to kind of pull on a little bit is the piece around our own work. Because I think that when people are first unlearning, when people are first coming to a place where they have been going through systems and they've made assumptions that everyone has the same access to privilege and power that they do, and then that kind of like crumbles a little bit for them, or that just like they see the hand behind the curtain a little bit, and they that can really shake someone and really shake and I see this a lot with students, right, in classes, and it can really shake and make them rethink a whole bunch of things, which is good, and it's important in that process, and people's learning is important in that process. And the thing that always sticks with me is that it's so important to go through that learning so that we can be good in working with, in solidarity with folks, working as accomplices, co-conspirators, co-resistors, what have you. And it's also important for us to do that work and that processing in a way where we're not putting another more burden on First Nations and Métis people and Indigenous peoples, because that's not their burden to carry. They've been walking through this system, seeing everything their whole lives in most cases. So yeah, that's the thing I wanted to thread on.
I'm like, so you guys have all touched on this, but what inspired you to get into these areas as non-Indigenous folks? Because Indigenous engaged research is barely welcoming to Indigenous researchers who do it. It is one of the many dark arts of things that Indigenous people have been subject to. So what made you guys, or what inspired you to get into this space? Was it a personal connection? Was it something you just felt passionate about? Like, what inspired you to get into this, space?
You want me to? I can talk.
I don't know. I just anyone else
Yeah,
wants to go
yeah.
first?
I'm like, I just talk a lot. So I try on panels. I'm like, maybe talk less though. So for me, I was going to school with and learning from and learning with First Nations and Métis students and Indigenous and allied researchers like Mary Hampton, who's no longer with us. Like I was working in her lab. And so it was those relationships and bringing some of these ideas that I had early on about my graduate work to be like, hey, would reproductive justice, would it make sense for us to come together? Would that support the work that's going on? And people having those conversations with me and saying, yes, let's do it. So for me, if I always just think about like how much sometimes people can make it sound like building relationships and doing community-based, embedded, engaged work so complicated almost. And I'm like, well, do you see an event that's happening where like you want to go and help out and there are people there who are organizing around something that's important to you? Go. And build those relationships. Don't go and be like, I have a research idea, which is literally like, I've been with an elder, well, that's happened, right? Where like someone like hands them a paper. Like, don't go and show up like that, but show up and help, like get to know people, relationship.
Cut the carrots.
Cut the carrots.
Cut the carrots. Yeah.
Now you have to explain what cut the carrots.
Yeah.
No.
I know, but you do the work that needs to be
Yes.
done at that event, and learn with people and build relationships with people. And then, and then there might be this opportunity for that work. And I hear people sometimes say that they don't have time in their jobs to go out and build relationships. I've heard people say that. And again, I think that's us making it too complicated. Like, are there things going on that you are passionate about and you want to learn more about? Go and learn with community and build those relationships and see where it goes and takes you. And also, the university will always take the most that you will give them. And so, especially for those researchers working in a university space, we need to push back and say, well, I am building these relationships. We do need this time for this. This is going slower. I do need to be out in community doing this. And to push back on the institutional demands where they'll just put you in another meeting that's not necessarily having any sort of impact. This is going to have an impact in the long run.
Memorandum of understanding, or it didn't happen anyway. So yes.
Were there any threads I left that needed to be pulled?
I was just like completely agree. Yeah, we've also been in many conversations in our school reporting on sort of initiatives towards Indigenous inclusion in the School of Public Health, and the way that question's being asked, I think is coming from a good place, but coming from a very colonial framework where they're like, and what are the numbers? Can we write them down? And it's not sort of about a ground up process. And so we're in the midst of doing some of that pushback around what genuine relationships mean and what they should look like, even in an institutional setting, like a university. Which has a long legacy of colonizing practices associated, which all ties back to how did I get into this space?
Yeah.
Which I grew up here in Saskatchewan. I'm relatively privileged, middle class, white suburbia, Lakeview, here in Saskatoon, and suddenly at about 16 years old, I was like, oh, I like girls. That's not usual at this time, especially late 90s. And suddenly, in realizing that I was different than I initially thought, and that I was not quite aligned with all of the white heteropatriarchy values around me. I learned those words when I went to university. Anyway, and so I saw that I was different, and I saw that, like, I don't know, I started to see the world a little bit differently, where I was like, oh, like, this world can be really cruel when you don't fit into the mold that's cast, so to speak. And also, isn't diversity of experience really cool to learn about and to know about? And like, no, the world it doesn't have to be all cookie cutter houses with white picket fences and everybody living exactly the same way. And that was a real gift, like, to learn about all this difference in the world. So I think being a queer kid in Saskatchewan in the late 90s was a real kick in the pants for me to become aware of the ocean around me. Does a fish see water? And I think when you're aligned with a lot of sort of mainstream values and expectations, as I was for the majority of my early life, you don't see that they're systems and expectations. And so but when you suddenly bump into a wall and go, wait a minute, like, turns out there was a wall there I didn't realize existed. You start to then see other walls and open up to this larger world of difference. So I think that was a big part of it. I'll never forget Carolyn Tate once saying you have to be queer or Indigenous to work in this office, because there was like a bunch of us anyway, and not Indigenous was also queer anyway. And it just seemed like there was an ability, I think, maybe then in my own experience to reflect on my own power and privilege, but then to also see, like, hey, wait, these systems aren't only oppressing queer kids. There's these rules of white colonial nation state building that many of us don't fit into. And hey, like, turns out my experience of feeling displaced is what other people have experienced their entire lives. And it just sort of, these things started to click. And it's been a journey ever since to understand why was that happening? How does that work? I, did my undergraduate degree in women's and gender studies, and I was like, oh my God, there's names for these things. There are words that express these things, and I've just been following that ever since because, at the end of the day, it's about, well, what we call in health research equity, but just valuing the diversity of experiences in the world. It's the most interesting thing. It's so boring when everyone lives exactly the same way with exactly the same values. Like, that's a boring world, and I'm really glad we don't live in that boring world. But we need to value all of this difference because it really is our strength. So yeah, I think the root for me was my root was my difference. I
Your
guess.
queer root's another story.
Yeah. I blame Scully and the X-Files. Oh,
I think a lot of
I know.
I'm trying really hard to be like, how do I say this because we're being recorded?
Yeah.
So I mean, I kind of started off with recognizing at about 17 when I got my girls and tried to put my 7-year-old in a grade 2 class. And I dropped her off for her first day, and I walked her to her classroom, and she was in a special ed class. And I was 17, so this is my disclosure. I was 17. I went to the principal and said, so tell me why this is the classroom she's in. I've registered her for grade 2, extra, extra, extra. Then she said, well, her exact words were, well, we find that, and she took a moment, Indian kids adjust better to mainstream education when they're in that class first. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's not going to happen here. And I'm just going to call you a racist C. And then I walked out. And then I took her into the grade 2 classroom. And that was the beginning of my journey. And from there, I got a little bit more eloquent with my words, not a lot. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Also got an education. The great thing is that I was in nursing when I first got the girls. I had finished early because I knew that there was going to be a struggle for me and my girls because our families were really struggling. So I went into nursing, had to drop out of nursing, but then once we kind of got settled, I went into childhood and family psychology because I didn't want to screw them up more than I already have. And then I did my first degree, and then I got the opportunity to go back home to Australia to do my PhD. And the gentleman, I'm not gonna say that. The white old guy in Australia that took me on as a PhD student said, well, this is what we're gonna do. I've created this program, and you're gonna take it and you're gonna give it to all the Aboriginal communities here. And I was like, oh, probably not. And so he was like, what do you mean probably not? I was like, that's not actually how this should work. I'm not gonna agree with anyone just giving my girls what they think they need without having a conversation with other people that know them. And he was like, well, how do you foresee to do that? And I said, well, this is a conversation. I'm just going to go and meet some people. And so I started that journey of just meeting people, which turned into a whole PhD of just hearing Indigenous voices across many lands about how our institutions and our programs are still harming people. And that for me was this aha moment. And then I was asked to be a part of a conversation between another university that I wasn't even a part of and a community who were trying to do exactly what you said and say, well, this is our research. We got funding for this. So this is what we're doing in your community. And they had previous relationships with that community, but still came to the table and said, this is what we're doing. And so I, through some connections that I had made just walking on the land and being with people and learning, they asked me to come and have a conversation with another university and them. And one of the elders, like later on in life, when they hired me to work with their community, said, you have a gift of translating academic to community and what community needs and priorities to academic that makes everyone feel like they're on the same page and on the same table. And at that moment, I realized, okay, well, maybe this is my gift. Maybe yes, I'm teaching. I love teaching other white humans and privileged humans about their privilege and some of the history and stuff that they need to learn about oppression. But I also love doing that translation. And I love having the opportunity to be in those spaces in which both parties can benefit, or usually the communities benefit more, but I can justify to the organizations or the institutions why the community needs to benefit more. And so I really love that because that for me fills my bucket, that I can like marry those two worlds and then continue to keep and hold the researchers accountable or the institutions accountable, because that does need to happen. Because what will happen is, and this happened in this space because I was there, but the community actually hired me to be what they called be between the rock and the hard place. And so I was working at Manawan to go to a women's resource center, and the university just kept this, they agreed with one thing and then kept trying to do the wrong thing. And so the community just hired me to essentially be the go-between, to hold the university accountable. So like I'm not the best friend of two universities in Australia, and that's
Yeah,
yeah.
that's why you left.
That's no, my girls wanted to come home to their country, and so we came home. Yeah.
I think that's one thing we probably all have in common is a lot of what we do is relationship brokering, the space in between and the translating. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah. I think that's a very unique skill set. How did you guys learn how to do it? So, how do you do what you just do very naturally? How do you walk students through it? Because students can be like start quite often from a place of I don't want to hear this. Yeah. So how do you guys walk students through it? Yeah.
I think I often encourage my students, I try and remind myself too, to be human first. Like Dr. Fornssler can walk into a room and that's a giant wall between me and other people, but that like be a human being, knowing that it comes back to that knowing who you are. And that prompts like an openness in a sense. I've always been rather confused by why talking to people in academia. I mean, I know we have methods like ethnography and stuff, which is all about like talking to people and hearing from people. We had to develop a research method to talk to people. Anyway, so
To just be somewhere for a long time. We literally have a method.
But yeah, but to remember that part of our humanity that, you know, isn't agenda driven, isn't about like institutional priorities, isn't about methodologies, but is just when you sit down with friends to have a coffee or go for a walk or whatever it is that you do to connect with other humans in the world, that's the foundation of relationships. Don't forget to laugh together. It's the best part of knowing other people, right? So I think that's really, and I mean, if you need an academic reference on that, looking up like cultural humility is one way to approach that, where it's basically giving like experts with letters behind their names permission to say, I don't know, right? We are tasked a lot of the time, you know, people like phone me and they're like, the drug crisis is going on. What do we do? And I'm like, well, I've made a lot of evidence-based policy recommendations that no one's following. But sometimes I have to be like, you know, I don't know how we address this specific gap. Let's ask other people who've experienced that gap. Let's find out. And that sort of, rather than sort of being like, oh, you know, I have competence and I can check that off and stop thinking about it. It's like always being in that process of continuous learning, of continuous openness to not knowing the answer, which then allows me to talk with other people and we co-create that answer. We find a pathway together. So yeah, I don't know why talking to people is really hard, but I feel like that's the foundation. So I first encourage students, especially in graduate studies, be who you are, come to the table as a human first with your heart. Know why you're in this work, right? I'm in the field I'm in because I love people who use drugs. That's what motivated it, because I see social injustice and inequity in this particular field. I often say I'm an advocate who got a hold of some credentials, like, and then I was like, oh, I can say more things, like more loudly, in certain circles and certain tables that I was excluded from otherwise. So long story of a way to say, like, be who you are. I'm always talking about like my garden. People are probably tired of my gardening activities with people in the community, about my dogs, my cat, about, you know, going to visit my family on Sundays and like have dinner together. Just things that make me human, that are Barb, and that aren't like Dr. Fornssler. I don't know who Dr. Fornssler really is. Sometimes I still look over my shoulder. I'm like, who are you talking to? Oh, that's right, me. Because I feel like I'm still the same core human being
Mhm.
I've always been. And so I like to meet with people as Barb, talk about those interests. It's amazing how many people played sports growing up. You know, like we share a lot of common experience with folks in many different ways if we allow for ourselves to be more than our title and more than our credentials, and be the full human being that we are. So that's my long
Yeah,
spiel.
I think
Be
that
human.
is be human. And there's a quote you always use, and then I always like
Liz
forget
Evans,
every bit
yes.
is, yeah.
Despite is it
Despite all my credentials.
despite my credential, my humanity is okay, it's gonna come to me. But yeah, it's basically like despite all my education and credentials, my humanity is my greatest asset in this work, and that is key. Yeah, everyone can Google it. Liz Evans, Portland Hotel Society. That yeah, and I think that is really our greatest asset is being open human beings. Who are willing to learn, and that's, I mean, why did I become a researcher if I didn't want to learn things all the time? I was obsessed with learning things, and so that's why I'm here doing this work, is I like to learn things. So if I already know everything, I'm not going to learn anything, and that's so always being humble in that way of
Yeah.
like knowing I don't know everything and I can't, and that's why I need many people around me who are like geniuses and thinking their own ways, and we all bring that talent together. You can move mountains, change the world. So sorry, I'm talking a lot.
No, you're great. And so in showing up and being human too, it's like, what is finding out what's important to people? Like, what do they want to know about what you're doing at the university? What is important to them to help them make decisions about, because, okay, I think sometimes we're so used to like presenting information to other academics in these like 10 to 20-minute presentation slide decks that we don't actually just sit down and find out, okay, what is a good way to talk to you? When do you want me to knock on your door about a project? What's interesting to you about this? What do you want to know? What do you like? What information do you want? And how is a good way to get that information? So there's people I call, there's people I text, there's people I email. There's like when we have kind of group meetings, a lot of times we have like different like images. We remind people of what we've done already. Like all of these different things that make it so that people actually are like, yeah, and they have the information they need, and they have it the way that it makes sense for them to be able to make decisions. And I think sometimes that part gets really fast tracked or like skipped over. And luckily you're really good at knowledge translation. So like you've helped me with things.
I think it's just because I don't understand half the institutional jargon either.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'm like, oh, that was really hard to learn. And of course folks don't know it outside of weird, like there's weird processes that are like assumed. We always call them the secret academic rules,
Secret
you know,
rules
like there's a lot of secret
academia.
rules, you know, about how things function and how to do things and how to administer research grants and all this sort of stuff. And so cutting through that and being like, this is the heart of it. But those sorry, I cut in.
Yeah, you did. That's okay.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
It's like it's okay. Like, yeah, you
always
did, but
learning.
and always, like it's fine. Really, this is very back and forth. And then I think on the institutional side, trying to, I try to use a lot of what the tools are that we have now. So like I started as a research assistant in my undergrad in 2007. We had RCAP, right? What do we have now? We have the Tri-Council Chapter 9. We have the TRC Calls to Action, the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls and Two-Spirit folks. We have those calls for justice. We have the Racist Principle. We have the recommendations from the Senate reports about forced and coerced sterilization. We have like plans. We have a lot of things that we can say, look and see how it aligns, and to make that argument with the institution about how it should be and how they are actually being a barrier to the work that they say that they're supporting and that they have a responsibility to support. So I do a lot of that.
Great.
I do a lot of listening. I do
Yeah.
a lot of listening and observing. I have my whole life. So coming from a really difficult childhood, my mom really struggled with her addictions, and so did her sister. I did a lot of chameleon work. So I would observe and listen and make sure that I was safe, make sure my cousins were safe that I've now raised. and just be what I needed to be. So I was a chameleon. And I think that has really helped me in that translation space, so I can listen, observe, learn, and then that means that I'm often not speaking up sometimes when I need to, but I often will say, okay, well, this is actually not my space to speak in. These are the people that I would bring into this space. And so I think just who I became because of my early childhood was that chameleon, that listener, that observer. And I really do give huge credit to my mom, who was just, she didn't give a crap if you were the prime minister or the janitor or the garbage collector. She was treating everyone the same way. And that is definitely who I am. And so that power dynamic is not a thing for me. So if I'm talking to my dean, or if I'm talking to the prime minister, because we were just in Ottawa, not talking to the prime minister, but if I was to run into him, I wouldn't be like, oh, sorry, sir. Like, I'd be like, hey, these are the things you need to hear because you're not listening to anyone else. And maybe you'll listen to a white girl because apparently my voice is more important, question mark. And I would say it just like that. I would be explicit.
Listen up, Carney.
Listen up, Carney. And I would say it just explicitly like that because people don't feel, I'm also really good. I'm really happy and comfortable being uncomfortable. So that also, which is why I thought you were pointing at me, that so plays in my favor, where I can say and have these really difficult conversations. Like, I recognize my white power and privilege in this space. I will step in and support this however you need me to support. This is how my power and privilege support in this space, but I'm sure there are other spaces that I haven't recognized. And I say that to my students, I say that to my colleagues, I say that to other people that I work with, to say these are the spaces that I can be of use because of the credentials behind my name, because I'm white, because I'm a woman. That normally doesn't play in my favor. But one of the biggest things I think, and you touched on it, is humility. I hear it across this panel. I actually was just in a water movement last summer, and one of the guys that I've been working with for like 4 or 5 years, we got pulled aside on the ledge ground steps, and I had to sign off for something, so we hopefully didn't get a ticket. But the moment I said that I was assistant professor at the University of Saskatchewan, he's like, oh, well, like, just if you can move everyone in 5 minutes, like, we won't write this ticket out. And I was like, oh, okay. We're walking back, and this young guy that I've been working with forever was like, you're a professor? And I was like, I mean, I guess, but that's only a piece of who I am. Like, but the beauty of that is that I have never been seen that way in his eyes. And so then I can translate, because the moment that we put that wall up of whatever, I'm a doctor, I'm a this, I'm a that, that's when people are hesitant to share with us. And so if I'm going to put that wall up, people aren't going to talk to me in a way that I can help to translate. Yeah.
And it's, in my view too, about like, I have certain skills. Like, I spend a lot of time acquiring certain skills, and that's like the research related or the ability to access information. And I'm always happy to share those skills in community. But my title is like, that's a title. The letters behind my name, they're very static again, whereas skills are something I use to do things. And so that's sort of not getting stuck in that stasis of like labels and identity, but applying the skills when asked, or saying, hey, you know, I could contribute this if it's useful, like, and it keeps that sort of, I don't know. I'm apparently really obsessed with movement and stasis today in my thinking, and but yeah, it's how I think about it, is that I have some skills I can bring to the table if they're useful.
And speaking of movement, I think another thing is that I always try to, like, I share with students, is like how we've seen the institution move, but also how we've seen the institution make exceptions. One-time exemption is a phrase,
The best phrase in the world.
best phrase to use ever when we're doing admin stuff.
Just need a one-time
We just need a one-time exemption. Just a one-time exemption on this policy.
The 18th time they usually pick up, but
So like trying to, again, be like, okay, but this policy and how it's being interpreted is a barrier to this work. So can we get past it for this community need? And I think too many people kind of like, because we've been going through institutions for so long, will just accept that no and won't try to figure out a way around it.
persistence.
They once said at my grandma's 80th birthday that that I was stubborn just like my grandma. And I think that that's literally why I'm here and are continuing to do this work, is that. Yeah.
I think you guys are all really good at using your power and privilege. Like you separate yourselves from it. You see it as like a tool and an attribute. And I see you guys push out against institutions to create this space that you sort of hold the space, but then you use it to bring in all these marginalized, unheard voices. Like I know you in your courses, you teach the course, you create the framework for the course, but you spend so much of your time bringing in other voices that would not have space in that space. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But you keep coming back to this, Holly. You have a beef with barriers. You keep talking about barriers. So, what are some of the barriers that you guys encounter in doing this work? You've definitely mentioned
talking about it.
I heard institution.
Yeah, I think the barriers, the institutional barriers is like, they're just set up in a way that is just built in and grounded in like colonial white settler nonsense of like, this is the way that we need to do it for financial accountability, for standards. And like, they seem to just seep in everywhere. They seem to just be not seep in. They seem to be like running against them. And so I really think we're in such a different place than we were 15 years ago in terms of like graduate students coming up and how they can make their dissertations different. Like Cass, when I think about the work that you did in your dissertation and how different like that is, and then how that also sets this precedent where people can do like dissertations that are non-conventional. So I see all these breaking down of barriers, but what I really see is universities that are really focused on the standards and financial accountability, and how that just gets in the way of so many things that we need to like walk alongside community to do, and how that ends up taking a bunch of our time to try to navigate them. And also then when we're working with community, a lot of times what the community wants us to do is, to get the university to do something that they're not used to, not comfortable with. And then so it's like on both sides, you have this extra work. You have this extra work because you're doing the work with community and sitting alongside them. And then you have to come back and fight this work within the institution. And I've been feeling lately that institutional kind of breaking down of barriers, that's not seen. And in fact, that sometimes we get problematized for it. We're spending too much time on admin. We're getting really like mired in these arguments about finances. This is just the way it is. And so every time I'm like hearing this is just the way it is, I'm like, but why is it like this? And what can we do? Like, and if that's not serving and that's not an important enough answer, how can we do it differently? So thank you for giving me space to talk about that.
Yeah. You were taking lots of notes.
Oh, there's so many barriers.
Yeah.
And I mean, you touched on so many of them. I mean, I think about, and we're in the College of Medicine, so I'm going to say it out loud and really loud. The power and the ego that some people sit with can be a huge barrier. So even when there's a space in which, say, I'm invited in, there's still pushback of, but that's not the status quo. That's not the institutional, that's not the policy. And then I say, why not? Why can't we do things differently? And I recognize particularly, I mean, this is the only college at USass that I know. So the College of Medicine is also very spread thin. And so you've got a lot of people that are trying to do the good work, but are also spread thin across clinical and research. And so it's easy for people to stay within that status quo because this is, I have so many things to balance. And I get it, because then we become problematized and then we spend extra time fighting. And then I just find that some of the power and ego I really struggle with, even though I'll go into a space and I teach my students this about calling people in, like, how do we do this differently? How, like, I hear you saying that this is the policy and this is how much time you have, but how is that going to work when we're trying to build relationships and so I try to call people in to try to think about, oftentimes I'll say, do you think that if you went to your grandma's house and said, I have this much time for this, and I have this much time for this, and I need you to share with me a story, if your grandma would be super happy with that, like, or if your grandma would be happy with me going into her house, she'd be like, I don't have a grandma, but I feel like a lot of grandmas would be like, no, don't come for tea. I don't want to talk to you if that's all that you're giving me. And so I think, again, coming back to that human space, if we're recognizing that this is within kinship, we're not just talking to a, I can't say plant, we're not just talking to a plant or an animal that is potentially not going to push back and say, no, no, I don't accept that. We're talking to humans that are now getting more strong of a voice to say, this is actually what I expect. And so then I love that, because the barrier then gets a little bit less, gets a little bit more malleable, in the sense of within some of those. And academia is notorious for this. As an academic institution, we are built on status and ego and title and all of these things. But to break it down and say, well, actually, that's not going to work in community, and to hear community's voice to say, I actually don't even want to be within your institution because it doesn't feel safe or comfortable. People are listening. So that barrier is kind of softening a bit. The recognition and of the value of time, the prioritizing of time is a really huge thing. And if you prioritize relationships and community, so if I'm out in a community for 2 full weeks, someone's like, oh, but you have all these other responsibilities. Yes, and like, yes, and does that mean that sometimes I work 15, 16-hour days? Not ideal, but then we make up for it on the other side of things. The time fighting is like, I have community partners that literally will say, this is our priority, but if you're going to have to fight too hard, I see it draining you. Let's not do it. And I'm like, that's not the point. That's not fair on them. That's not a fair burden on the communities to know that that fight is so hard on this side. Because I'm constantly having to explain, yes, absolutely, I want to do that. Let me see what doors I can open. Yeah. So I was writing a lot.
Ooh, time just made me think about the fact that, like, I think that too, there's both like apparently there's like a time estimation thing where we just estimate time badly. But the other thing is that when you're used to coming into meetings where we're sitting down, we have an agenda, this, and we're not doing that relationship building, it's really easy to underestimate the time that it will take to do the work in a very fulsome way. And so for students, I'm like, well, whatever time that you think you actually need with your advisory, take that and put it at like 1.5 or double. I learned that the hard way in my PhD because we did not have enough time and resources to make space for that time. And that sits with me, and that's something I carry, right? So it's like, yeah, you just, again, learning, right? You're always learning.
I think with barriers, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
I didn't want to cut in again.
You can cut in on me anytime. It's okay.
But I think so. I mean, it seems like there's more barriers than pathways sometimes, and that we're still building or trying to build those pathways institutionally. Like I do remember when you like could not smudge indoors on the campus. Like it was a fire hazard, and everyone was worried about it. And I was like, calm down. But it was because nobody understood what smudging was or what it meant, right? Like there was an education gap there and a misunderstanding of what it meant and what the likely impact was. So a lot of education helped move some of those barriers along. One of the things I found is when I run into these barriers, like administrative barriers are usually because I call the university a machine, but this machine is set up with certain standardized pathways. That's how it operates. And I find when I can provide a rationale, or can show folks how this actually aligns with the existing categories, they're like, oh, okay, right? So I was on a project where we wanted to gift trees to everyone who'd been involved in the project, like a tree to plant, basically, right? And of course, this got flagged as like, oh God, you're buying agricultural resources with this research money. And I was like, no, it's a land-based project. That's an office supply. And they were like, oh, it's an office supply. Oh, okay. And like, they just went with it. They're like, yeah, trees are office supplies in land-based projects. And that was fine. So So if
Trees
you
are just pre-paper.
right, like
Oh my God, you're a genius.
right, like what they actually needed at that administrative office was a reason that this was a permissible purchase, right? And that's how they got that job off of their plate and onto someone else's, and that's how the machine continues running, right? And so sometimes if you can provide them a rationale or an explanation, it can open many pathways or align what seem to be divergent pathways into what already exists. So I found giving them a rationale helps, showing them how it aligns exists, and then returning to that human side. You know, I was thinking about a project a couple of years ago where I was working with folks, many of whom didn't have bank accounts, and the university during COVID was like, "Oh, we can't issue checks anymore. Like only direct deposit sort of stuff was going on," and there was all this sort of barrier. And they weren't research participants, so I couldn't do it. They were part of my advisory team, the folks who didn't have a bank account set up. And so this became a whole thing where they were like, no, we can't issue checks. And I'm like, okay, I need to talk to somebody because I recognize, you know, it's like, I'm not going to yell at like, well, I would never yell at a cashier at a store. But they're not setting the price point for the entire Walmart corporation, right? So like, I need to talk to someone who's like the purchaser of this corporation. Anyway, so I, you know, politely, I'm like, can I talk to someone else in accounting? And basically when I explained, hey, I'm working with folks, not as research participants, but as advisors on my project, these folks do not have a bank account. I need a check issued. Like I can't do a direct deposit. The explanation, like how do I put it? The person on the other end of that phone call was like, people don't have bank accounts. And I was like, yeah, sometimes in these positions, this is the work that I do. And it was like, she was suddenly aware of the privilege of having a bank account and a mailing address and these sorts of things that we just take for granted in a university environment. And she was like, oh my God, like it had never, she wasn't aware that this was a barrier. And as soon as I pointed to this barrier, it was like, absolutely, we're going to find a way to move this institution to issue checks, maybe only in this limited circumstance, but there was a human being on the other end of that call. Like these institutions, these machines, there's people populating them all throughout. And if you can talk to that other person, explaining, hey, actually, we're two people who work in the same machine. This is the outcome that I need. And here's what's happening. They will help you solve that problem. Or at least that's been my experience 99% of the time. The person on the other end of that call, the human being who's working there, also wants to support community, wants to support the good work. And we found a way to do that. So I find like when there are those barriers, when you point to them and when you can connect with that other human rather than trying to submit it through some online form that just doesn't fit, it makes a world of difference. Overall. So I think that sort of, you know, techniques, show them how it aligns. Trees are office supplies, and give that rationale to the powers that be. And then yeah, build new pathways when you point out that there isn't one, you know, by connecting with other humans. The same way, you know, when I'm out in community, I'm trying to be Barb. I'm still Barb when I'm trying to advocate for different institutional pathways.
You know, you guys remind me of like how much policy is a barrier. And policy is really just a set of decisions taken at a certain point of time by people with the presumed authority to do so based on certain information. And so that's a perfect example of it's a different time, you present a different information, and a different policy choice can get made. And so I think so much of our policies need to evolve at the university because time has changed so much. These community-based methodologies are being used much more widely now. And so between time and the new information being presented, we need to do things differently at the institution. And it's definitely not keeping pace with how quickly community-based researchers are moving. Yeah. I have, I'm sure like we want to get to some questions, but the last one I wanted to ask you guys is, how do you know when you're doing community like engagement with Indigenous folks? How do you know when you're doing it well? What's your sign? I mean, we probably know if you're screwing up, people yell at you or they don't want to work with you again, but how do you know when it's going really well? What are the signals?
I actually think that is my signal. If they're comfortable enough to tell me that I've done wrong, that's when I'm doing something. That relationship is strong enough that they're able to tell me that I've done something wrong.
Yeah.
So that's actually for me like an indication that I've built the relationship well enough that they can tell me something really difficult that I've done or that I've done a mistake on. And then we can come back and we can recalibrate.
Right.
And so that for me, that is an indication that I'm doing something well. In the community that I was living and working with in Australia, they'd be like, my girl, we need a growling. And I was like, oh, good, yay. But I recognize it as a learning like a learning opportunity that I could grow from, something that you talked about. And it is absolutely a gift, because if someone's not comfortable enough to tell me when I've done wrong, which hopefully if I've said something wrong today, that you would growl me. I would, thank you. That they would come to me because they know that I'm going to take that on, and I'm going to be like, okay, yeah, you're right. Tell me more. How do I learn more? So I think that for me is a huge indication. And that's all I'm going to say. Keep going.
The honesty and not being afraid to step into conflict the way that you would with someone you're just really comfortable with, to say, hey, this didn't feel good, or this is not okay. Yeah.
I'm actually going to use an example. So, and hopefully he's not going to get mad at that. I'm not going to put a name to this, but this is just an example of a trip that I was just on with 2 elders and a colleague. And we were getting more comfortable because we were traveling internationally together, and was meeting his family, and they were calling him different like nicknames. And so then I was like, oh, I'm going to call you this too. That's such a cute nickname. And he was like, no, it's okay. Just call me this. And I was like, yeah, but and that's just me trying to be relational. And then later I heard him talking to other colleagues about how when he came to Canada, there was quite a bit of microaggressions that were around his full name. And so when I was trying to be relational and try to like step into those nicknames and be like, oh, bro, blah, 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 it was actually reminding him of how in our Canadian institutional context, the colonial context, he has 2 names and they just wanted to call him one, or they didn't want to pronounce it right. And so there was this, and when he said that to his colleagues, my brain is going, oh crap, what have I done? Just recreating this really uncomfortable space for him. So pulled him aside later and said, oh my gosh, I will never call you this. And thank you so much for being safe enough in that space to tell your other colleagues about it. And then knowing that I'm hearing, and he's like, oh, I didn't think you would make that connection. And then he recognized that, like, as the trip went, that was more relational. And so that he was like, just in the institution, when we're with other colleagues,
Right.
please use the full name, and then it's fine to call me bro or to call me my nickname when it's just you and I. And so then we were able to have that really good conversation, but I had to step back and be humble enough to be like, oh crap, I messed up because of something he was saying to others. So yeah.
100%. Just really agree with the correction. Like, it's like I've had a knowledge keeper like yell at you, like you've done this wrong, like 100%. And to respond to that with thank you, like thank you for teaching me how to do it better, and not, oh my gosh, I should feel terrible in myself for I'm a failed human because I got yelled at. No, that's a great gift. If somebody takes the time to correct you, that is a great gift. And be thankful for that correction. Also promise you'll never do it wrong again. This is because you'll remember that correction, and in a good way, right? And then maybe you carry that forward in a good way. But I think for me, the best like signs that I've sort of done it right is when we can joke together, when we laugh together. Like substance use and its harms are like a deadly serious topic, and a hard, challenging topic with a lot of trauma and a lot of grief attached. So yeah, when I can come into a space and people can joke like, oh, the researcher's here, we're gonna get all the numbers, and like this kind of stuff, good, they can razz me a bit. We're joking together. That's a good thing, in my view, and to be invited to spaces. So yes, I send out invitations, I ask people to gather those things as a researcher, but when I get an email or a text message that's like, hey, community's coming together at this time and place, are you coming? Like, that's a great gift, to be invited to their table, not only inviting people to my table, quote unquote. That makes a great thing. I always say the best peer review I ever got as an academic was from a community member when Prairie Harm opened. The ED gifted me a hoodie, and it was a staff hoodie because I'd been working alongside them to try and open that site. And that is the best gift ever, that I've ever received. And it was just, something that I don't know if he understood how meaningful that was for me, but it really was everything. So, so gifts, laughter, and being invited are all, in my view, like good indicators, as we'd say in research, of like you're doing things in a good way. And they don't come all the time, and keep inviting people to your table, keep fostering that relationship building. It matters. And yeah, and eventually you get to know people. So.
Yes to all of these things. And it also made me think about how being told that we've done something wrong or we should do something differently um, or being corrected. The reason that I think sometimes like there's like books written about white settler women and like wanting to do good, right? And to be good. And so I think that there's like that reason that that is hard, and kind of like for some of the students that I work with to kind of like let go of and understand that that is a gift, and that's actually telling you that this person wants to work with you and wants to do the work better with you, is because of that. And then it also reminds me of my friend Karen Lawford and her sharing with me that like how perfectionism is just like it's one strand of white supremacy. And so how this idea that we should be able to like immediately know, working with different communities and different individuals, different people, that exactly how to do it right, that's not going to serve us. It's going to keep us from doing the work that needs to be done. So we need to, walk alongside and be ready to be shown, okay, but you got to move over in that lane, girl. And then the other thing is like also like just being in spaces where people are openly sharing and sharing sharing and generating those ideas. You see it as an instructor too, right? Like if you're in that space and no one's talking, and the meetings are like that too with community. If people are like, what if we did this, and what about this, and do we know where this is at, and they're there to like share their really early ideas and be vulnerable with you, that is like that to me is also just like this feeling of like, cool, we're really doing this. And that's literally what I say to them.
Yeah, and like just to build on some of the stuff that you guys have been saying is like I even got like a message this morning, I miss you, like let's chat. And I was like, yes, and I have to run to this meeting, but yes, like I'll call you later. And being invited to someone else's table, even if it's just their dinner table or their like for tea.
Huge.
One quote that I really rely on, and I talk about it for probably a good hour, I'm sure my students get annoyed, is I think it's Lila Evans that talks about, if you're here to help me, you're not here. You shouldn't be here. But if you're here because your liberation is tied up with mine, let's do this. And that for me, when there's like, I was talking earlier to Jed about how I've been invited to come and be like a debrief for those that are part of the MNLA this weekend, I believe. I don't know, I got my dates mixed up. But to be able to be invited to that table when I'm going to be angry as all heck when they are not acting the way that they should in that space, that I need to check myself as well. And so that, but they know that. They also know that I'm there because I care so much. And they know when I'm riled up with them that is part of that debrief. But I know you wrote something down, so I'll stop.
No, I really so appreciate that. I think when you mentioned like white settlers wanting to like be nice and white ladies wanting to be good and sorts of things, and the best piece of advice I ever got when it comes to holding systems accountable was like, you are nice, you don't have to be nice.
I love
Like,
that.
and I was like, oh, he spoke to my heart. Because sometimes to make change, we have to be not nice. We have to be those accomplices willing to push and say, no, that's incorrect. We're not doing it that way. And object to the processes that are going on, respectfully and all that. But that really stuck with me. Like, you are nice. You don't have to be nice about everything that goes on. And I think that was, something that I carry. As soon as you said it, I was like, I am nice. I don't have to be nice. And to distinguish between those things, right? And when we're holding systems accountable, sometimes we have to be not nice when barriers don't want to get out of the way, or when a rationale isn't working, or standing up against injustice, right?
And I think that's really important, because that's something that we often have to switch then, right? So we're in these spaces and we're fighting and we're doing all the things. We're at meetings, we're at these spaces and we're constantly busy. And and we constantly have an agenda, and then to switch that off and to just be. One of the, because we're sharing quotes apparently today, one of the elders that I worked with at my first ever community that I lived with for 5-6 years, I think she eventually, because I was like, okay, so these things need to be done, they're coming up this time, and these are, she just stopped me and she said, you're going to know what you need to know when you need to know it. And I was like, okay, my brain, because I'm coming from academia, I'm like, okay, but all these things need to be checked off. And she just said, take a breath. You will know what you need to know when you need to know it. And that for me has been something that has played over and over in my head the moment I step out of this institution, the moment I'm engaging with other humans in a relationship. Because I don't need to come and ask you all these questions because we work together quite often. If I'm supposed to know it, you're going to tell me at some point. I don't need to constantly ask questions. And I think that is a thing that we often fall into when we're Western trained, is like seeking out. And I had another instance in another community where a young girl took me by the hand and said, you're not like those other white women. You don't ask too many questions. And again, that listener, that observer, all of these other people were just like, okay, yes, and so this is what you're doing now. And tell me about that land-based thing. What does that mean? And what is, versus just knowing what I need to know when I need to know it, being present, being open. And I think those things have really stuck with me, particularly as a co-resistor, because I can step in or I can observe and just know what I need to know when I need to know it. And be what I need to be when I need to be it.
Mind blown.
There we go. I was like, that was ridiculous, but that's okay.
Thank you for hosting this conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, I love asking. I could ask these questions of you guys all day, but I'm sure you
Jed's like,
something else
Cash
you wanted
just
to
took
do.
it on.
Yeah.
Bye, Jed.
No, it's been absolutely great. It's been I'm learning a ton. I feel like this hour and a half wasn't near long enough. Like I think this conversation could.
Half day workshop, you
Yeah.
guys. Another excuse to work together. Yeah.
So many questions, and we probably have some questions here, and then I do believe we have questions in the chat as well. So I have a lot, but no, we'll make space for. It's not really questions. It's just. There we go. Yeah.
What happens if you actually cause disruption, dissension, or division in Indigenous community in the name of your allyship work?
I'm gonna say that there's certainly times when researchers step into ongoing community conversations without appropriate awareness that that was an ongoing community conversation. Like I think, and that's where I think, I don't know, researchers can cause upheaval without, but those tensions were there in that community. So like tread lightly, be careful. And I mean care-full, like be full of care as you're entering a new space. If you're asking questions about where people stand, great, but try and respect the fact that like just because we showed up as researchers doesn't mean that no one was talking about this before I got there with my genius research question. Like no, like people are gonna, and in any community, there's going to be many different perspectives, right? So it's not your job as a researcher to determine which one is the correct view. You know, like that's not it at all. But maybe your role in this becomes like, hey, can we foster a conversation in this community? Or what do you need from me to provide? You know, I see that there's this tension happening in the community here. Like, what would help inform that? Sometimes you just have to let people fight it out, like, you know, like respectfully, but sometimes it's not something that I'm going to solve as a researcher, but something that I'm going to witness that I might be able to offer some bits of information if requested. But yeah, quite often those tensions preceded my arrival in a community.
And something that I've learned a lot from like the First Nations and Métis folks that I work with is we often like create like certain almost containers around some of the conversations that we're having where we are coming together for 2 days, for instance, to have a planning conversation. Okay, we make sure that we take pictures. We make sure that of the space so people know what the space is before they come into it. There's a space for when people need breaks. If people need to go for a walk, they can go for a walk. So there's lots of ways that we incorporate these trauma and violence informed approaches into coming into the spaces. So, so that people can come in there, have these really difficult conversations, but also be taking care of themselves in the time that they're having those conversations. And it's also, I think there's also just like when you're before you go into a community, you know, in the allyship and the relationship building that you're doing, a lot of times you're learning from people who are, you know, you're going to say, okay, well, like, how can we do this in a way that's actually going to contribute to community conversations and community work? So people can carry that forward and that you're contributing rather than taking away. And that's where a lot of the lessons around having this like space where people can go and take breaks, making sure that people have information about what that day is going to look like or those 2 days are going to look like before we come in there. Sharing summaries, having those, you know, meeting people where they're at in terms of what communication works for them. So for the last one of the planning meetings we recently held, a couple of them, I sent out a short summary of what we were going to talk about, but I also sent out a voice note. I introduced myself because there were a couple of people there who didn't know me, who were coming, and provided a bit of an overview of what the day would look like. And that is important. And I'm thinking of Carolyn Pelche, who works with All Nations Hope. She talks about we do have to be careful about what we wake up in communities. So that is something to work with people and to be very, full of care in the conversations that we are facilitating and having and being part of when we're there, and but people want to have a difficult conversations a lot of times. It's just about how you're having those difficult conversations.
I love that. And it's when this happens, not if, because it will happen if you're having these difficult conversations. And I think my 3 are: when it happens, apologize, offer to remove yourself, because if you being there is what's causing the harm, that's when you remove yourself. And so there's been times where my association with one person that maybe caused harm across nations, that was then attributed to me because I was there and I was triggering others. So every time I was in spaces in which I knew that that was my association, I was very transparent, very like right up front. Hey, if this is going to cause harm, like if me being here doesn't feel good, I'm happy to remove myself. My voice isn't the most important one here. It happened to me, unfortunately, in a community. It didn't really cause a lot of division, but disruption, where a student said something at a conference, was really inappropriate, but the student has some neurodiversity, didn't recognize it was inappropriate. So not only did I have to nip that in the bud in the community with the different people that it upset, but I also had to nip it in the bud of the student. And then that's a teaching moment. And then I also find that in those moments, I'm often the devil's advocate. So like if I'm working with someone in community and they're like, yeah, but this person says this and they're wrong and this, okay, that's interesting. Where does that come from? Is there some like background? And I try to get them not to agree with the other person that they're putting on the table, but to say, I wonder where that comes from. Like we all have different spaces in which we come from, that maybe that has something happened in their life. Or so I try to be that devil's advocate to try to get them to not, because they have history, so much history that has created some of that disruption and division, that I try to get us to think together differently about it.
I think building research relationships is a lot like dating. And sometimes the first date doesn't go very well. You try a second date, maybe it goes okay. Sometimes the first date tells you everything you need to know, and it's just not going to be the right fit. And then other times, as the late Joanna Piskany used to say, you're trying to figure out, are we dating? Are we shacking up? Or are we getting married? And it's okay to sometimes like have that date and it doesn't become anything. Like the fit's not right, the timing's not right, or you realize this relationship is going to take me another year to build, and that's okay. And this one over here, we're on like year 10 of, and so we just pump out stuff like that together. And that's okay. I think it's to be expected that it's not all the same.
And relationships come with relational tension. And sometimes it's with the community you're working with, sometimes it's with you. And trying to figure out and remove, diffuse, all of those things, or not diffuse isn't the right word, remove, navigate, like support, but it is something that happens.
Yeah.
When, not if.
Yes.
Yes.
Key point, right? Why not it, for sure. If we have one more question online, are there any questions from? We have a question here for sure, and then we can.
Question.
Oh, has it? Okay.
Look at us just answering questions we don't even know
I
there.
My
know.
whole page is question. So yeah.
So mine was just
Question.
out of interest, so that you are nice, you don't have to be nice comment. I always thought that women had to be nice, but then I'm like, wait, is this a racial thing? Does an Indigenous woman have to be nice, otherwise they're not heard? Because I found the sterner I get and the more abrupt I get, the less it's received, the less it's listened to. So I have to navigate in nice ways. And typically with a good ally, I can just be blunt and I can say things as they are. And then sometimes I realize, oh, wait, I still have to go back into that box. So I don't know, are you are all three of you able to just go ahead and not be nice? Is it received well?
How nice are you guys really?
Like, how nice are we?
So
I
kindness.
I
can
think
help,
like,
you know.
yeah, like I think when I'm saying like, okay, so what I was like really talking about more so was this idea that like your being good is your identity. So when someone points out how you haven't done a good job here, or this needs to change, or actually that's not how we want to do things, sometimes people will resist that and be defensive on it because they're so bound up in being a good ally, right? Like the static identity of it, being a good white woman. And so I think that is when we're talking. So that was the one piece, and then Barb was talking about so that's the piece I was talking about. And I think in terms of being, I do think that stereotypes about Indigenous women and racialized women and about them being problematic and, all of these things plays into this higher burden of expectation on Indigenous women to be nice. I think that there is like a lot of still different gendered expectations, especially in more conventional like institutions, around how women should behave, and the fact that if we point out things in a way that's not couched in the nice language, we're more likely to be seen as like being a problem than our male colleagues, right? So I do think there's still that gender piece, but I think, thank you for pointing out that burdensome aspect of it, because I do think that still is there.
100%.
For sure.
100%.
I think you guys are all also very kind, but you're not people pleasers either. And I think another part that we all have in common is none of us really like fit in. Like you guys all described, you didn't really fit in. So I've never really cared because like it's just obvious in the spaces I go that I don't. So am I gonna like fool or win people with my nice list? Like not really. Like so I just kind of don't try.
Yeah, I love that actually. And you do that really well. But I think women in general, we are more likely to be called aggressive.
Yeah.
Than
Or a
assertive.
bitch. Like just
Or a
Yeah.
bitch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just straight up.
Yeah.
And so I am often one, and like I've been in spaces, particularly in the middle of nowhere, Australia, where like the women will ask me to come to a table because they're like, we know that we have what we are labeled as angry Black women. And so we know that your voice will be heard. And so that's part of that allyship too, right? Or that like co-resistor where they're bringing me to that table because they know that they're going to be assertive, not aggressive. Let's be honest. Just because the colonial patriarchy thinks that it's aggressive doesn't mean that it's aggressive.
Right.
Just because then that's where I step in. And in those moments that if you feel like you need to be assertive, that you can have someone beside you and behind you, wherever, that says, be really explicit about it. I hear the way that you're responding to, is it Jenna? Yes. That you're responding to Jenna. is you hearing aggressive Indigenous woman and just being really explicit about it. Because I can say that. And I've said that to researchers from other universities to be like, I hear the way that you're responding to that is you're not hearing her voice. You're actually hearing her, what you are hearing is aggression. And that's actually just passion and assertiveness and care, full of care. And so it's about being, for me as a co-resistor in that space, it's about being really upfront and saying, this is the reality. And I sometimes will say that for myself as well, but not as often, where I'll say, like, I hear that you think that I'm being aggressive, but I'm actually just asserting the fact that I have a lot of passion in this space. I don't speak, like everyone else, we don't speak enough for ourselves, up enough for ourselves, but we will for others. It's more comfortable.
I was at SGI recently and I was dealing with someone who was very racist. And I walked in knowing I was going to say, I'm tax exempt on this vehicle because I'm buying it on reserve. Okay. So taking advantage of a right that I have. And because I knew this person might like give me a bit of a hard time, I came in with a smile and I'm being all pleasant. And I'm like, I'm going to be nice. And this person's going to be nice back and it'll be simple. They were not nice back. They denied me the right. They said, policy is this, blah, 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 blah. I tried to continue to be nice. And then finally the veil just came off and I was like, nice does not work for me. I've just tried it for like 11 minutes. And I was like, this is not me. And so I switched to saying, look, I have a PhD in public policy. I know the policy you're talking about is not an actual policy. I know that it's this. Where did this come from? And she's like, well, so-and-so called me and said, this is the policy. And I said, so can you find for me where it's written down in SGI's policies that this is your policy? And she was like, well, it's going to take me time. And I'm like, I got all the time. And so she looked online and then like later came up to me and she was like, so it says that there is no policy and that your ID doesn't have to be valid. And so I guess you're going to get it. And I was like, can I take that piece of paper as well so that I can present this to another SGI if I ever have issues? And she was like, here you go. So I was just like, nice for 11 minutes, got me nowhere. So it's like not my jam. Like it's never going to be my currency. Like maybe logic or something is my currency, but like, it's just not ever going to be my thing. And I think to some extent for you guys, so it's like, if you just don't fit in, you're like, I know it doesn't really get me anywhere to just kind of like kiss butt with people who don't want me in this space or don't care if I'm here or
I think not being invested in being liked
specifically
by the institution can serve you really well.
100%.
Yeah.
I have a strong rationale. I don't need them to like me in that sense. I mean, it's nice if I can get along with my colleagues. I'm not saying be disrespectful to your colleagues or these things, but
like be a human, obviously, but
provide them the rationale to provide the support you need. That's great, but I don't like we don't have to be friendly friends at the end of the day.
And I see a lot of people. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, please, no, jump in.
I see a lot of people who are so worried about that perception from colleagues, from leaders, from other people, that they will do things that don't actually align with their values because they want to continue to be liked. And I think that just disservice. And that's when I think I see a lot of people who will say, I am an ally, but when it gets difficult and when people make you uncomfortable for your advocacy, then they stop, right? And so it is why I kind of accomplice co-conspirator. Like it speaks more to me because I'm like, I am willing to lose the likes. I'm willing to the institution to think I'm a problem. That's okay. I will do that because I'm bound up with the people that I care about and the work that we do and doing it well.
And it can be really isolating, but that's okay because I like my cats better than humans anyway. So like,
I mean,
and like that's the real reality is like I'd rather be up in Cumberland House than here on campus because I am isolated here. Not anymore because sometimes you're here with me. And sometimes you guys are
that's
here.
That's the thing when you have that courage to not be liked in a sense and like to speak, like suddenly people will come out of the woodwork who are like, hey, I think that too, and I was scared to say it. And suddenly you find yourself in this community of people who think similarly.
And there might be less.
But
But you could be the coolest group.
But you are.
We are the coolest group.
You know you're cool when you say you're cool.
Yeah. That's my currency.
That's how we know.
Nice. I appreciate the question though very
Yes,
much
I
because
do.
think, it's one thing for me as a white settler to say, but there's a different political dimension.
Yes.
When you're in a different context, right? So
Yeah.
It's a great question.
yeah, it really is.
Just come hang out with us whenever you want.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
We're getting t-shirts.
Yeah,
T-shirts?
Yes. I feel like clubs need t-shirts.
they do.
Do we have any other questions?
You can also find us all
Yeah.
online if you
Yeah.
have more follow-up or want to know more about
Yeah,
that stuff. You can
100%.
find everybody on the USAS website.
Or if you need a white colleague to come with you and like be at a table, and if it's then like I literally would be at tables and like the women would be like it's your turn, and I was like, okay. But if you need a white colleague, like there's 3 of us that
Rent
are
a
willing. Rent a colleague,
Rent an ally.
Yes.
Yes.
So resistor, like
resistor.
I mean, that is if
That's a research
nothing
project.
else. Right? Like, yeah.
It's an intervention research project.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry, I'm the dork.
You are. You're.
I am
part of
that.
the genius.
Can I ask one question? It's just related to that last audit, because I know I've learned from several Indigenous academics, women, especially when it comes to race. And sometimes they just said, they're exhausted trying to explain this,
Yes.
especially to people who don't want to hear it, right? Just repeating it to the point where it's, they just can't answer another question. And you'll ask now, can you take this one? Right. So they get to a point where they need to take a step back. Unfortunately, you can't change the color of your skin. Right. So that's one thing you can't. It's very hard to take a step back from. So is it acceptable then, or do allies need to take a step back at times just to like recharge? Or is that only like a privilege that's afforded to certain groups of people?
That was actually one of my questions was, how do you sustain yourself in this space? How do you self-preserve and do self-care? Because it is exhausting. Like one of the things that I do as an Indigenous academic is a lot of my students are non-Indigenous. It is ridiculous if I start talking at the front of the room about allyship. I'm not an ally. So for the heavy lifting of that 3-hour course, I bring in one of these folks to talk about allyship because they need to have it from someone who models it and who speaks from that positionality, and they never hesitate. But I know you guys get a lot of requests to do different things.
I think it's also a privilege. Like you said, I don't have a color of skin, or I don't have a look that doesn't allow me the privilege to step back. White presenting because I am white, but this weekend I presented myself as a white woman of color.
We were on a panel. This was hilarious. We were on a panel. And so like as a joke, we're all saying our positionality, and there's someone who's obviously visibly Black. And so he self-declared, I am Black, and we all laughed because Kate, we get it. And I self-declared that I'm Indigenous, Kate, and then you self-declared.
I said something like, when you're facing racism, it's if you can't take it, if you need to step back, that it's my responsibility as your colleague, a white woman of color, to step in. So to your point, or to your question, is really like, and I often say this to students, yes, it's heavy, but it's also, I don't have to carry it every single day on my skin or on my face.
Yeah.
And so it's not as heavy for me as it is for the person that's carrying it day in, day out, 24/7. And so do I sometimes get burnt out? I do. Yeah. I just up the meds.
Yeah. Cuddle more cats.
Cuddle more cats. Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, this is being recorded.
Yeah.
Yes, meds equal cats.
Do you want me to go? You want to go?
I just feel like I actually really enjoy fighting with white supremacy and white supremacists. I really have. Well, and when people get really offended, they're like, I don't know if you should call that white supremacist. I'm like, why? Are you a white supremacist? Do you object to this? Like, it's only white supremacists that would object to this concern. So what are you saying to us in this conversation? And that kind of, I don't know. I don't care that we're being recorded. I am a big fan of like, yes, you should absolutely punch a Nazi in the face. There's no question in my view.
I'm a big fan of white supremacy.
No, I'm not. I enjoy, well, because I feel like there's this like weird insistence on ignorance that is just exhausting everyone else. And that's the goal of it though, is to run down the energy of other people. So I, at times really enjoy, maybe I'm just thriving on spite at this point, but I feel, but I also feel like it's a way to speak back to my history, to my ancestors, to my, I remember having a conversation at one point, in a class in my undergrad, and it was like, what does a racist look like? Right. And we all have this idea of the person wearing the KKK hood and this kind of stuff, or at least that's what people like me were brought up with. And really unpacking that and realizing, no, like the racist in the room is my grandfather.
Yes.
It's my uncle. It's we all have that uncle, right? But it's my neighbor. It's my friends that I went to school with. It's in the lies that we were told about this history of this nation state. It's in education and health, and it's all these places. So I just remember being so fucking angry that I'd been lied to, that I was like, I was told lies in my education, and this isn't okay. And look at how we're treating people. Like, this is fundamentally wrong. And so in a sense, like, it enlivens me to be able to correct that, and to try and push forward for a more just, society. So yeah, when I say I enjoy fighting white supremacists, I enjoy fighting white supremacy. I want that nonsense knocked out of our systems and out of ourselves, as white settlers. We need to do better and learn better, and be empowered in that capacity to do better. We don't have to act like this anymore, like we really don't. And there are better ways to do it. And we can change. You don't have to get offended when somebody says that that's racist. You can be like, oh my God, it is, and reflect on that and learn about yourself and how you can do better in the future. Like, it's an opportunity. It's not the end of a conversation. Yeah. Stop insisting on ignorance being correct, and take that opportunity forward. I think what helps me thrive is responding to some of that history that I don't support and don't want to have continue. And I feel like sometimes, like, I don't know, I know other people in my identity group that they're racist, and it's nobody's burden. It should be my burden, in a sense, to correct that version of that point of view. I'm like, no, you're doing it wrong, right? So there's that white nonsense roundup group on Facebook. I love that group. So it's basically like a bunch of white people who are going out to round up white nonsense that's being hosted on the internet, right? So that other folks are not dealing with that burden anymore. Like, we've got to get our act together, and it's time. Like, it's way past due, frankly. So yeah, you've got the racist redneck out of Saskatchewan who's saying shit that's totally uninformed. It's absolutely my job to be like, no, you didn't. And like, you were incorrect, and fix that situation. That's my job as a white settler ally, is to correct that nonsense and round up that nonsense and try and prevent some of the harms that it's been doing for a very long time. Okay, sorry, I had to rant.
When you run for
You're not
premier,
empowered by
you
that.
have my vote.
Okay. I'll start the white nonsense roundup part.
Hashtag white nonsense roundup.
I feel like the rodeo people will get behind it too.
They might.
Like,
They might just be confused.
yeah. Also,
As a former rodeo
there
person,
you go. I don't know who I'm speaking to here, right? Sorry, I talked a lot.
yeah,
That's
as
good.
we all do. And so what I would say is that I agree very much with what's been shared. And I think that there are times where you see a conversation that isn't going to go anywhere. And so I've chosen to go another way. Yes, obviously you garden.
Yeah.
You also fight with people.
Yeah.
On social media
Sometimes.
platforms, because again, that spite, it feeds you.
It does.
And so it is important to take care of yourself in this work, because if I'm not taking care of myself in this work, I can't actually show up and be advocating, respecting, supporting people. If I show up and I am burnt out, then I'm probably am going to get that messed up about what is about me, what is about advancing this, so that it's a better and more gentle and like inclusive space for everyone, which I think is like ultimately the goal, in which we uphold Indigenous people's rights and self-determined health. Like, so we do need to figure out how to take care of ourselves in this. And there are lots of books on that. If you're someone who is interested in finding self-care things because you are someone who is doing this work and haven't been taking care of yourself, there's a really good book by the Nagoski sisters about the stress cycle, where they actually talk about intersectionality and the patriarchy in it, within it. So it's actually like based in science. They're like, one of them has a master's in health, some health discipline. So they actually went to the peer-reviewed research to do it, unlike a lot of the stuff out there that is self-helpy that I do not recommend that you use to take care of yourself in this work, because it'll just make you mad at something else. But all to go back to like, just, we have to also learn to take care of ourselves in this work, and to make sure that we are supporting the people around us, and we are doing the work that will have that impact that we are looking to have in help making this world better, rather than kind of like careening through, and in that careening actually doing harm. So I just wanted to say that.
That's why these spaces and these like relationships where you find colleagues who are doing similar work are so important, because you do need that to fill your cup and be like, okay, I'm not crazy with what I'm doing. Like, other people are experiencing this and I'm not the only one. And what challenges have you had? And the learning that you can do from each other and just filling each other's cup is huge. Like, when I do this work on my own at periods of my career where I've had to, it was isolating, it was lonely. I often found myself, asking, am I crazy? Because I'm not seeing this mirrored by anybody else doing work in the same way that I am. And the minute that like I let go of that and found people doing similar work, I felt so much more like preservation of self in that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So finding other people doing this work, and then you can debrief with them. You can like call them after there has been a crazy day. You see that mirrored, like when you've been talking to people at the institutions and they are trying to convince you that you're doing something wrong. You have people to call to hear that you're not. That is really important.
Yeah.
I also recommend dogs.
Yeah.
Pets and cat.
Yeah. And good conversation.
Guinea pigs.
May they rest in peace.
May they rest in peace.
Yes. I do think about too, one of my many years ago, Tom Kalin, he was part of ACT UP in New York during the height of the HIV crisis. And he was talking about how, as much as the advocacy and the actions they were taking publicly every day, he always said that like the dancing together was just as important as that advocacy work during the day. Like, don't forget that joy. The joy is the reason you're doing this work, right? That's what motivates it too. And so remembering the joy, I think, is really important. And I think that's why I thrive on the fight, is that I'm like, we're fighting here, but why am I taking time to write something out? It's not necessarily for that person that I'm actually fighting with. It's so that anyone reading sees that they're not in isolation to think differently than this, and that they're not the only voice in the room. There is a collective and a collaborative of people who are pushing for this change together. It's a unified front. We're dancing together as much as we're advocating together, right? And so that joy is so important, I think, too.
I would dance with you guys any day.
Totally.
Me too.
All right, morning raves.
Morning
rave.
Well, I think the conversation is far from over, but we are over time, so we might have to call it and then carry on another day. One thing I did want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, fine today. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you
to those joining online. Can't thank you enough. These 4 women are here absolutely on their own time. We did offer tobacco just as a means of respect and for sharing their knowledge. And there's also a gift. So it's a mug, Cass. I showed it to her and I just there is one for everybody. So yeah, it's not it's good medicine. It's kind of in keeping with the space. So one thing I'm going to take the liberties and I'll include and I might send a follow-up email to all the participants is there might be a lot of people who are wanting to engage in like allyship who may not have your credentials. Like so I was just hoping to put together some list of like resources as to maybe where people can learn more, right? Like because there's a ton of academic articles out there on like white fragility, but I mean sometimes there needs to be more, a more introductory level of like social justice or advocacy work. So I might bother you for that and then send that out just, so people can further their own understanding, carry on the conversation. And I can't thank you again. Thank you enough. Sorry. Thank you again. Thank you enough for coming. This has been it's been fun, right? It's been a lot of fun. It's been a great way to spend an afternoon. If it was 5 o'clock, we could continue at the pub, but it's not.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, Jen. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.